Hello, fellow SGI members. My name is Elisa, and I am reading Goshos for the visually challenged or anyone else wishing to hear the Goshos read aloud. Today, I am going to read one of my favorite Goshos that I've read over and over throughout my practice because it has so many valuable lessons. It's called Letter to the Brothers, which you can find in the Writings of Nichiren Daishonin, Volume 1. Or as I will read today in the major writings of Nichiren Daishonin, Volume 1, page 131 to 148. As I've explained in the past, I find the older volumes, Goshos in the older volumes, easier to read because I've read them so many times, and there are some name changes and translations in the newer one that are less familiar. So I hope you don't mind. I thought I would start first with the background just so you can get an overview of this Gosho, but it really applies to more than just the situation of the recipient. So I don't want you to think that you need to be having problems with a sibling in order to read this and get tremendous value out of it. This particular Gosho was written in April 16th, 1275, to the Ikegami brothers and their wives. So the background says the two Ikegami brothers, Munenaka and Munenaga, converted to true Buddhism about the same time as Shijo Kingo. The elder Munenaka was the first to join, probably in 1256, and his younger brother followed soon after. Both were officials in the Kamakura shogunate, and their father, Yasumitsu, held an important post in the government construction office. Trouble for the two sons was inevitable because their father was a zealous supporter of Ryokan, the chief priest of the Ritsu sect, who was highly active in political affairs. Politics always gets in the way, huh? In April of 1275, Yasumitsu disowned his elder son. No matter how offensive his son's religion might have seemed to him, there must have been some other provocation for so extreme a measure. Disownment was no light matter. Primogeniture, the right of the eldest son to succeed to the wealth and social prestige of the family, was a solidly entrenched fixture of Japanese society. The individual scarcely existed outside of a family context, and centuries of intra-family rivalry, feuding, and even murder attest to the importance of being first in line for inheritance. There was awesome social and economic sanctions against disowned persons, and they suffered hardships that are difficult for those of us living in today's relatively liberal society to imagine. Daishonin suspected Ryokan's hand in the affairs. By disowning Munenaka, their father, in effect, was sure to provoke a rivalry between the two sons and could easily tempt the weaker Munenaga to trade his beliefs for the right to his father's estate. Ryokan had long since abandoned any designs on Nichiren Daishonin, but could easily apply pressure to his followers. Evidence shows that Ryokan persuaded Yasumitsu to take action against his sons. The letter to the brothers mentions 3 ways in which believers should view such obstacles in the light of Buddhism. 1, strong faith gives one the opportunity to purge himself of bad karma from the past, and himself or herself, I might say. The Buddhist gods are testing his or her faith. And 3, the function of the devil of the 6th heaven has possessed his or her parents or others in order to obstruct his or her practice. The Daishonin encourages the brothers by stating that Muninaka's disinheritance came as a result of his strong faith in true Buddhism, and that by overcoming this obstacle, they can both change their destiny and gain indestructible happiness. He concludes that were it not for obstacles, there would be no way of knowing that this religion has power. Muninaka's father forgave him, but disowned him again in 1277. The brothers nevertheless continued their practice in exact accordance with the Daishonin's guidance, and in 1278, after a total of 22 years' practice, converted their father to true Buddhism. Amazing story of two brothers. Okay, so here's the Gosho. Oops. Letter to the brothers. The Lotus Sutra is the heart of the 80,000 teachings. 80,000 is sort of a general number for lots, so it's not precise. The Lotus Sutra is the heart of the 80,000 teachings and the core of the 12 types of sutras. All the Buddhas, whether of the past, present, or future, attain enlightenment because they take this sutra as their teacher. Throughout the universe, they lead the people with the sight they have obtained from the supreme vehicle. Entering the sutra repository and examining the complete collection contained therein, I found that there were two versions of the sutras and treaties brought to China between the Yongping era of the latter Han and the end of the Tang dynasty. So that would be between 58 AD and 907 AD. There were 5,048 volumes of the older translations and 7,399 volumes of the newer translations. The older ones were primarily by Kumarajiva and Paramartha, and they placed emphasis on conveying the true meaning, and the newer translations were mostly done by Zhuang Chuang, who placed greater stress on literal translation. Each sutra, by virtue of its contents, claimed to be the highest teaching of all. However, comparison reveals that the Lotus Sutra is as superior to all the other sutras as heaven is to the earth. It rises above them like a cloud above the ground. If other sutras could be compared to the stars, the Lotus Sutra is like the moon. If they are as torches, stars, or the moon, the Lotus Sutra is then as bright as the sun. More specifically, the Lotus Sutra contains 20 important principles. The first two are the teachings of Sanzen Jin Tengo and Go Hyaku Jin Tengo. Sanzen Jin Tengo is explained in the 7th chapter entitled Keijo Yuhon. Suppose someone grinds a galaxy into dust. He then takes this dust with him and goes 1,000 galaxies toward the east, where he drops one particle. He then proceeds another 1,000 galaxies eastward and drops the second particle. He continues on in this manner, dropping another particle and another until he has exhausted the entire galaxy of dust particles. Then he gathers up all the galaxies along his journey, whether they received a particle or not, and reduces them all to dust. He places these dust particles in a row, allowing one entire eon to pass for the placement of each particle. When the first eon has passed, he places the second particle and then the third, until as many eons have passed as there are particles of dust. The total length of time represented by the passage of all of these eons is called Sanzen Jintengo. It was this long ago, in the remote past indicated by Sanzen Jintengo, that the three groups of Shakyamuni's disciples, including Shariputra, Mahakashyapa, Ananda, and Rahula, learned the Lotus Sutra from a bodhisattva who was the 16th son of Daitsu Buddha. However, deluded by evil people, they eventually abandoned the Lotus Sutra. They fell back into the Kegon, Hanya, Daijuku, or Nirvana Sutra, or further down into the Dainichi, Jimmitsu, or Eigan Sutras. Continuing this descent, they fell down through relatively blessed lives of rapture or tranquility, and finally into the paths of evil. During this period of Sanzen Jintengo, they were most often born into the hell of incessant suffering. Sometimes they were born into the 7 major hells, or less frequently in the 100 or some other hells. And the note explains that in the Hokke Gengi, written by Tiantai, it explains that 136 kinds of hell include 8 major hells, each with 16 subsidiary hells. The last and worst of these 8 major hells is the hell of incessant suffering. The point is that one's suffering differs according to the nature and degree of his offense. On very rare occasions, they were born into the lives of hunger, animality, or asura. And only after myriads of eons were they able to be born again as humans into lives of tranquility or rapture. The 3rd chapter of the Lotus Sutra states, quote, "They dwell in hell so long that they come to think of it as natural as playing in a garden, and the other evil paths seem like their own home," unquote. Those who commit the 10 evil acts fall into the hell of Tokatsu or Kojo, and there must spend 500 lifetimes or 1,000 hell years. Those who commit the 5 cardinal sins fall into the hell of incessant suffering, and after staying there for 1 medium eon, are born again in this world. So the 10 evil acts refers to 3 physical evils of killing, theft, and adultery, 4 verbal evils of lying, flattery, slander, and duplicity, and the 3 mental evils of greed, anger, and stupidity. And these were expounded in the Kusharan. Why is it then that those who abandon the Lotus Sutra fall into the hell of incessant suffering and have to stay there for such an unimaginably great number of eons? The sin of discarding one's faith in the sutra must at the time seem nowhere near as terrible as killing one's parents. However, even if one killed his parents in 1, 2, 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, 1 million, or even 1 billion lifetimes, he would not have to remain in hell for a period as long as Sanzen Jintengo. Even if one were to kill 1, 2, 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000, or as many as 1 billion Buddhas, would he have to dwell in hell for as long as Goyaku Jintengo? The 3 groups of men of learning, however, had to suffer through the period of Sanzen Jintengo, and the great bodhisattvas through that of Gohyaku Jintengo, because of the sin they committed by discarding the Lotus Sutra. This shows what an unimaginably terrible sin it is. To put this simply, if one strikes at the air, his fist will not hurt, but when he hits a rock, he feels pain. The sin of killing an evil person is minor compared to the sin of killing a good person, which is grave. If one kills someone who is not his kin, it is like striking mud with his fist. But if he kills his own parents, it is like hitting a rock. A dog may bark at a deer and not have its skull broken, but if it barks at a lion, its intestines will rot. The Ashura tried to swallow the sun and the moon and had his head split into 7 pieces. Because Devadatta harmed the Buddha, the earth split open and swallowed him alive. The seriousness of a sin depends on whom one harms. The Lotus Sutra is the eye of every Buddha. It is the eternal master of Shakyamuni himself. If one discards one character or even a single dot, his sin is graver than that of one who kills his parents 10 million times over, or even of one who sheds the blood of Buddhas everywhere in the universe. This is why those who forsook the Lotus Sutra had to suffer for as long as Sanzen Jintengo or Gohyaku Jintengo. Moreover, it is extremely difficult to meet a person who teaches this sutra exactly as it reads. It is even more difficult than for a one-eyed turtle to find a piece of floating sandalwood, or for someone to dangle Mount Sumeru from the sky with a fiber from a lotus stem. The great teacher Tsuen was a disciple of priest Swan Shuang and the teacher of Emperor Tai Tsung. He was a saint who was not only well versed in the Sanskrit and Chinese scriptures, but had memorized all of the Buddhist sutras. It is said of him that the Buddha's ashes fell from the tip of his writing brush and that light shone forth from his teeth. His contemporaries respected him as though he were the sun and the moon, and men in later ages earnestly sought out his teachings as guides for living. Even so, the great teacher Dengyo denounced him, writing, quote, "Even though he praises the Lotus Sutra, he destroys its heart," unquote. This quotation means that even though he intended to praise the Lotus Sutra, in the end he destroyed it. Priest Shan Wu Wei was once the king of Udayana in India. He abdicated the throne, became a priest, and in the course of his Buddhist practice, journeyed through more than 50 countries in India, finally mastering all the esoteric and exoteric teachings of Buddhism. Later, he went to China and became the teacher of Emperor Xuanzong. Every Shingon priest in both China and Japan has since become his follower. Though he was such a noble person, he died suddenly, tormented by Emma, the king of hell, although no one knows why. Nichiren considers that this happened because Shan Wu Wei was at first a votary of the Lotus Sutra, but when he read the Dainichi Sutra, he declared it superior to the Lotus Sutra. Similarly, Shariputra, Madhgalyana, and others were not doomed to wander through the evil paths for the period of Sanzen Jintengo or Go Hyaku Jintengo because they had committed the 10 evils or 5 cardinal sins, nor was it because they had committed any of the 8 rebellious acts, which include it's a crime set forth in the Tai Ho statute enforced in the 8th century Japan. They were attempts on the emperor's life, 2, plots to destroy imperial graves or palaces, 3, treason, 4, murder of an older relative, such as a grandparent, parent, sister, or brother, 5, murder of other senior relatives or of one's wife, 6, disrespectful acts against the emperor or imperial shrines, 7, unfilial acts such as against a grandparent, and 8, killing one's master, teacher, or superior. Those are the 8 rebellious acts. It was because they met someone who was an evil influence and discarded the Lotus Sutra to take faith in the provisional teachings. Excuse me. According to the great teacher Chentai, quote, if one befriends an evil person, he will lose his mind, unquote. Mind means the heart which believes in the Lotus Sutra, while lose means to betray one's faith in the Lotus Sutra and follow other sutras. The Lotus Sutra reads, quote, but when they are given the medicine, they refuse to take it, unquote. The great teacher Chentai stated, those who had lost, quote, those who had lost their minds would not take the excellent medicine, even though it was given to them. Lost in suffering, they fled to other countries, unquote. Since this is so, the believers of the Lotus Sutra should fear those who plague their practice more than they fear bandits, burglars, midnight killers, tigers, wolves, or lions, even more than invasion by the Mongols. This world is the province of the devil of the sixth heaven. All of its people have been related to him since time without beginning. He has not only built the prison of 25 realms within the 6 paths and confined all mankind, but also made wives and children into shackles and parents and sovereigns into nets that block off the skies. To confound the Buddha nature, which is the people's true mind, he causes them to drink the wine of greed, anger, and stupidity, and feeds them nothing but poisoned dishes that leave them prostrate on the ground of the 3 evil paths. When he happens on one with a seeking mind, he acts to obstruct him. If he sees that he is powerless to make a believer in the Lotus Sutra fall into hell, he tries to deceive him gradually by luring him toward the Kegon Sutra, which resembles the Lotus Sutra. This was done by the priests Tu Shun, Chi Yen, Fatsong, and Cheng Huan. And these were alive between 557 and 839 AD. So then the priests Chia Xiang and Chen Chu Wan craftily deceived the believers in the Lotus Sutra into falling back upon the Hanya Sutras. Swang Chuang and Suen led them toward the Jimitsu Sutra, while Shan Wu Wei, Qin Kang Che, Pu Kong, Kobo, Chikaku, and Chiso deluded them into following the Dainichi Sutra. Bodhidharma and Huiko caused them to stray into the Zen sect, while Shantao and Honin tricked them into believing the Kamuryoju Sutra. In each case, the devil of the sixth heaven possessed these Buddhist scholars in order to deceive the believers, just as foretold in the Kanji chapter of the Lotus Sutra, quote, "The devil enters one's body," unquote. The devil of fundamental darkness can even enter the life of a bodhisattva who has reached the highest stage of practice and prevent him from attaining the Lotus Sutra's ultimate blessing, Buddhahood itself. Thus, he can easily obstruct those in any lower stage of practice. The devil of the sixth heaven enters the lives of a man's wife and children and deludes him. He also possesses the sovereign in order to threaten the votary of the Lotus Sutra, or causes parents to hinder the faith of devoted children. And I just want to remind you, in case there's anyone who has not listened to the introduction to the writings of Nichiren Daishonin, when it talks about devils and such, these are internal. These exist within our own lives. They're not external beings, such as in Christianity, where my family originated. And we see devils with the red and the pitchfork and or Lucifer, or some external being that actually existed. These are within our own lives, our own tendencies that can come out. Just keep that in mind so you won't be frightened. Halloween approaches here in the US. Okay, continuing. Prince Siddhartha wanted to renounce his title, but his son Rahula had already been conceived. His father, King Shuddhodana, therefore admonished him to wait until after the child was born before he left to become a monk. However, a devil delayed the childbirth for 6 years. In the distant past, Shariputra began his practice of bodhisattva austerities during the latter day of Sandara Buddha. He had already practiced for 60 eons when the devil of the sixth heaven became worried that in another 40 eons, Shariputra would complete his bodhisattva practice. The devil disguised himself as a Brahmin and begged Shariputra for his eye. Shariputra gave him an eye, but from that moment he lost his will to practice and then gave up, thereby falling into the hell of incessant suffering for countless eons. 68 million believers in the latter day of Daishonin Buddha were deceived by priest Kugen and 3 other priests so that they denounced priest Fuji, and as a result fell into the same hell for as many eons as there are particles of dust on earth. So Prince Fuji was one who correctly upheld the teachings. The story is found in the Mutsuzo Sutra. It is the same with Nichiren's disciples. The Lotus Sutra reads, quote, "Since hatred and jealousy abound, even during the lifetime of the Buddha, how much worse will it be in the world after his passing?" Unquote. I think this is such an important quote for members and all people today, so I'm going to read it again. The Lotus Sutra reads, quote, "Since hatred and jealousy abound, even during the lifetime of the Buddha, how much worse will it be in the world after his passing?" Unquote. It also reads, quote, "The people will be full of hostility, and it will be extremely difficult to believe." Unquote. The Nirvana Sutra reads, quote, "By suffering sudden death, torture, slander, or humiliation, beatings with a whip or rod, imprisonment, starvation, adversity, or other relatively minor hardships in this lifetime, he will not have to fall into hell." Unquote. The Hatsunayan Sutra reads, quote, "You may be poorly clad and poorly fed, seek wealth in vain, be born to an impoverished or heretical family, or be persecuted by your sovereign. It is due to the blessings obtained by protecting the law that one can diminish in this lifetime his sufferings and retribution." Unquote. And again, that last sentence, quote, "It is due to the blessings obtained by protecting the law that one can diminish in this lifetime his sufferings and retribution." Unquote. This means that we who now believe in the true law once committed the sin of persecuting its votary in the past and should therefore be destined to fall into a terrible hell in the future. However, the blessings gained by practicing the true law are so great that we can change our karma to suffer terribly in the future by meeting relatively minor sufferings in this life. As a sutra describes, one's past slander may cause him to be born into a poor or heretical family or be persecuted by his sovereign. A heretical family is one which slanders the true law, and persecution by one's sovereign means to live under the rule of an evil king. These are the two sufferings confronting you now. In order to expiate your past slanders, you are opposed by your parents who hold heretical views and must live in the age of a sovereign who persecutes the votary of the Lotus Sutra. The sutra makes this absolutely clear. Cast off any thoughts you may have to the contrary. If you doubt that you committed slander in the past, you will not be able to withstand the minor sufferings of this life. Then you might give in to your father's opposition and desert the Lotus Sutra against your will. That first sentence is especially one worth remembering. If you doubt that you committed slander in the past, you will not be able to withstand the minor sufferings of this life. Daishonin goes on to write, remember that should this happen, giving in to the father's opposition, you are certain to fall into the hell of incessant suffering and drag your parents into it as well, causing all of you indescribable grief. To grasp this requires a great seeking spirit. Each of you has continued your faith in the Lotus Sutra and can therefore rid yourselves of your heavy sins from the past. For example, the flaws in iron come to the surface when it is forged. Put into flames, a rock just turns to ashes, but gold is rendered into pure gold. This persecution, more than anything else, will prove your faith genuine, and the Jurasetsu, 10 goddesses of the Lotus Sutra, will surely protect you. The demon who appeared to test Sesendoji was actually Taishaku. The dove saved by King Shibi was Bishamon. It is even possible that the Jurasetsu have possessed your parents in order to test your faith. Any weakness will be cause for regret. The cart which overturns on the road ahead is a sign to the one behind. These are all wonderful stories about Sesendoji and King Shibi, but they are not delineated here in the notes, so keep studying and you will come across those stories explained. In an age like this one, no one can help but thirst for the true way. You may hate this world, but you cannot escape. All Japanese are certain to meet with terrible misfortune in the immediate future. The revolt, which broke out on the 11th day of the second month in the 9th year of Bunei, 1272, was like blossoms being lashed by a gale, or like bolts of silk burning in an inferno. Who can help but abhor a world like ours? And that revolt mentioned here refers to an incident in which Regent Hojo Tokimune dispatched troops to Kyoto and had his half-brother Tokisuke killed on suspicion of conspiracy. In the 10th month of the 11th year of Bunei, 1274, the people on Iki and Tsushima Islands were slaughtered at one stroke. How can we say that this is no concern of ours? The soldiers who went off to confront the invaders, how forlorn they must have been. They had to leave behind their aged parents, little children, young wives, and cherished homes to go out and defend a strange and foreboding sea. They saw clouds on the horizon and imagined them to be the enemy's banners. They saw ordinary fishing boats, thought them Mongol warships, and were paralyzed with fear. Once or twice a day, they climbed the hills to look out over the sea. 3 or 4 times in the middle of the night, they saddled and unsaddled their horses. They felt the stark reality of Shura in their own lives. And Shura refers to Ashura, the state of conflict, one of the 10 worlds. All this and the persecutions you have suffered as well can ultimately be blamed on the fact that this country's sovereign has become an enemy of the Lotus Sutra. His opposition was instigated by the slanderous priests who follow the Hinayana precepts or the Nembutsu and Shingon doctrines. You must endure this trial and see for yourselves the blessings of the Lotus Sutra. Nichiren will also loudly call upon the Buddhist gods. Now more than ever, you must neither show nor feel any fear. That was one of my favorite lines. Now more than ever, you must neither show nor feel any fear. Women are faint-hearted and your wives have probably given up. Yet you must grit your teeth and never slacken in your faith. Be as fearless as Nichiren when he faced Hei no Simon. Although theirs was not the road to enlightenment, the sons of Lord Wada and Lord Wakasa, as well as the warriors under Masakado and Sadato, fought to the death to preserve their honor. Death comes to us all, even should nothing untoward happen. Therefore, you must never be cowardly or make yourselves the subject of ridicule. So a little bit about those people mentioned. Wada lived from 1147 to 1213, and Wakasa died in 1247. Wada Yoshimori was a military official of the Kamakura regime. He was tricked into fighting against the Hojo clan, and was killed in battle along with all his family. Lord Wakasa, or Miura Yasamura, another official, was also defeated by the Hojos. He and more than 500 of his clan took their own lives. Masakado, who died in 940, was a distinguished warrior of the Taira clan who wielded power in eastern Japan. In 939, he rebelled against the imperial court by proclaiming himself the new emperor. However, his cousin, Taira no Satomori, crushed his forces and killed him. Sadato, 1019 to 1062. Abe no Sadato, head of the powerful family in eastern Japan, he sought independence from imperial rule, but was defeated and killed in the battle with the imperial army. So these would have been well-known stories that by mentioning their names meant something to the recipients of the Gosho, even though they are not familiar to most of us, if not all of us in the United States who haven't read the Gosho. Okay, getting back to the Gosho. We ended, therefore, you must never be cowardly or make yourselves the subject of ridicule. I am deeply worried about you both. Therefore, I will relate a story which is important for you. There were two princes named Poi and Shu Qi, who were sons of the king of Huchu in China. Their father had willed his title to the younger brother, Shu Qi. Yet after he passed away, Shu Qi refused to ascend to the throne. Poi urged Shu Qi to assume the title, but Shu Qi insisted that Poi, the elder brother, do so. Instead, Poi persisted, asking how the younger brother could contradict their father's will. Shu Qi agreed that the father's will clearly named him, yet he still refused the throne, claiming that he could not bear to push his elder brother aside. Both brothers then abandoned their parents' country and traveled to another, where they entered the service of King Wen of the Chu dynasty. Shortly thereafter, the country was attacked and King Wen was killed by King Chu of the Yin dynasty. Less than 100 days after King Wen's death, his son, King Wu, prepared to do battle with King Chu, but Poi and Shu Qi, holding fast to the reins of his horse, strove to dissuade him, saying, "You should be in the mourning for 3 years after your father's death. If you now start a war, you will only dishonor his name." King Wu grew furious at this and was about to kill them both, but Tai Kung Wang, his father's minister, restrained him. The two were so loath to have anything more to do with this king that they went off to seclude themselves in Mount Shuyang, where they live solely on bracken. One day, a person named Ma-tsu passed by and said, "Why have you hidden yourselves in a place like this?" They told the whole story to Matsu, who replied, "If that is so, don't these bracken also belong to the king?" Thus reproached, they immediately stopped eating the plants. It is not the way of heaven to forsake sages. Thus a god appeared to them as a white deer and provided them with milk. After the deer had gone, Shuchi said, "Since the white deer's milk is so sweet to drink, its meat must taste even better." Hoei tried to silence him, but heaven had already heard his words, and they were abandoned at once. Thus, they eventually starved to death. Even though a person acts wisely throughout his life, one careless word can ruin him. Not knowing what thoughts you may have in your hearts, I worry about you a great deal. Very strict, huh? When Shakyamuni Buddha was a prince, his father, King Shuddhodana, could not bear losing his only heir and therefore would not allow him to renounce his royal station. The king kept 2,000 soldiers posted at the city's 4 gates to prevent him from leaving. Nevertheless, the prince eventually left the palace against his father's will. In general, it is the son's duty to obey his parents. Yet, on the path to Buddhahood, not following one's parents may ultimately bring them good fortune. The Shinjikan Sutra explains the essence of filial piety as follows, quote, "By renouncing one's obligations and entering nirvana, one can truly repay those obligations in full," unquote. That is, in order to enter the true way, one leaves his home against his parents' wishes and attains Buddhahood. Then he can truly repay his debt of gratitude to them. In worldly affairs as well, if one's parents foment a rebellion, it is dutiful not to follow them. This is mentioned in the Confucian scripture, the classic of filial piety or piety. When the great teacher Chentai had commenced meditating on the Lotus Sutra, the apparitions of his deceased parents sat on his knees and tried to obstruct his practice of Buddhism. This was the work of the devil of the 6th heaven, who took the form of his father and mother in order to oppose him. I have just cited the story of Poe and Shuchi. There is one more lesson you should learn from history. Emperor Ojin, who now is Bodhisattva Hachiman, was the 16th ruler of Japan. Emperor Ojin had 2 sons. The first was Prince Nintoku and the second Prince Uji. The emperor transferred his throne to the younger brother Uji. After their father passed away, Uji asked his elder brother to take the throne. But the elder brother reproached him, saying, "How can you refuse to comply with your father's will?" They argued back and forth, and for 3 full years, no one claimed the throne. Therefore, the people suffered indescribable grief. It was like a curse upon the nation. And Prince Uji finally thought, "As long as I am alive, my brother will not assume the throne." So he committed suicide. At this, Prince Nintoku was racked with sorrow and fell into despair. Seeing this, Prince Uji came back to life in order to give words of encouragement to his brother. Then he passed away again. It is recorded that when Nintoku at last ascended the throne, the nation became peaceful and received 80 boatloads of tribute from the 3 Korean kingdoms of Silla, Pakche, and Koguryo. There are other cases where the relationship between the sons of wise kings was not harmonious. What bonds have enabled you 2 brothers to continue on such good terms? Could you be Princes Jozo and Jogen reborn, or the embodiments of bodhisattvas Yakuo and Yakujo. They were brothers who cured people of physical and spiritual sickness. According to the 27th chapter of the Lotus Sutra, they are the re-embodiments of Jozo and Jogen. When your father disowned Munenaka, I expected that Munenaga would refuse to side with his brother, thereby making it even more difficult to reconcile your father and Muninaka. Yet if what Tsuruo told me is true, you two are determined to resolve this together. I am overjoyed to hear this surprising news, as I told you in my other letter. Could there ever be a more wonderful story than your own? The record of the Western regions tells about a hermit who lived in the deer park at Benares, India, hoping to master occult powers. He learned to turn rocks into jewels and changed the forms of men and animals, but he could not yet ride on clouds or travel to the palace of the immortals. In order to accomplish these goals, he took as his disciple a man of integrity. Giving him a long sword, the hermit bade him stand in one corner of a meditation platform, telling him to hold his breath and utter not a word. If the disciple could remain mute through the whole night and dawn, the hermit was certain to master the occult. Determined, he sat in the center of the platform with another long sword in hand and chanted the incantations. Making his apprentice take a vow, he said, "Even at the cost of your life, say nothing." The man answered, "Though I die, not a word will leave these lips." In this manner, they passed the night until, as dawn was about to break, the apprentice cried out suddenly, and the hermit immediately failed in his attempt. He reproached the disciple, shouting, "How could you have broken your vow? This is deplorable." Repenting deeply, the disciple said, "I dozed off for a while, and in a dream, my previous master appeared and rebuked me. Yet I endured this, not uttering a word, for my debt of gratitude to you is much greater. My former master grew furious and threatened to behead me, but I still said nothing. Finally, I was beheaded, and when I saw my own corpse on the journey of death, my sorrow was undescribable. Still, I did not speak. Eventually, I was reborn in a Brahmin family in southern India. The pain I felt on entering and leaving the womb was unbearable, yet I held my breath without crying. I grew up to be a young man and took a wife. My parents died. My child was born. I felt sorrow and joy, but said not a word. Living on like this, I reached my 65th year. Then my wife said to me, "If you still refuse to say anything, I will kill your beloved child." Thought flashed through my mind that I was already in the last years of life, and if my child were killed, I could not beget another. Feeling that I must shout, I suddenly awoke. The hermit said, "We were not strong enough. You and I have been deceived by a devil. Our task has ended in failure." Lamenting, his disciple said, "Because I was so weak-willed, my teacher failed to master the occult." The hermit regrettably replied, "It is my fault for not having admonished you enough beforehand." Nonetheless, as the record states, his disciple was so grieved that he could not fulfill his obligation to his teacher that he brooded over it and died miserably. In China, the occult evolved from Confucianism, and in India, it is found among the Brahmin teachings. Yet it does not even approach the primitive Aegon teachings of Hinayana Buddhism, much less the teachings of Sugyo, Baekyo, or Engyo. Therefore, how could it possibly approach the Lotus Sutra? The four devils fiercely oppose even attainment of the occult. Therefore, how much greater are the tribulations which will confront disciples of the votary of the Lotus Sutra? For he is the first to embrace and the first to propagate Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, the ultimate principle of the Lotus Sutra, in Japan. It is impossible to imagine, let alone describe in words. The Makashikan is the great teacher Chentai's masterwork and contains the essence of all the Buddhist sutras. During the 500 years after Buddhism was introduced to China, there appeared 7 great teachers to the north of the Yangtze River and 3 to the south. Their wisdom was as brilliant as the sun and the moon, and their virtue extolled far and wide. Yet they were confused as to which sutras were shallow or deep, inferior or superior, and to the order in which they had been taught. It was the great teacher Chentai who not only clarified the teachings of Buddhism, but also brought forth the wish-granting jewel of Ichinen Sanzen from the repository of Myoho Renge Kyo and bestowed it upon all people in the 3 countries. 3 countries meant India, China, and Japan. This teaching originated in China. Not even the great scholars of India could formulate such a concept. So the great teacher Chang'an wrote, quote, "We have never before heard of any teachings as lucid as the Makashikan," unquote. End quote. Even the great masters of India were not in a class with him, unquote. The doctrine of Ichinen Sanzen revealed in the 5th volume of the Makashikan is equally profound, especially profound. If you propagate it, devils will arise without fail. Were it not for these, there would be no way of knowing that this is the true teaching. One passage from the same volume reads, quote, "As practice progresses and understanding grows, the 3 obstacles and 4 devils emerge, vying with one another to interfere. You should be neither influenced nor frightened by them. If you fall under their influence, you will be led into the paths of evil. If you are frightened by them, you will be prevented from practicing true Buddhism," unquote. This quotation not only applies to Nichiren, but also is the guide for his disciples. Reverently make this teaching your own and transmit it as an axiom of faith for future generations. This is a wonderful passage that you may have heard many times. I certainly have. I'm going to read it again because it's so good. Quote, "As practice progresses and understanding grows, the 3 obstacles and 4 devils emerge, vying with one another to interfere. You should be neither influenced nor frightened by them. If you fall under their influence, you will be led into the paths of evil. If you are frightened by them, you will be prevented from practicing true Buddhism." This unquote. This quotation not only applies to Nichiren, but also is the guide for his disciples. Reverently make this teaching your own and transmit it as an axiom of faith for future generations. The 3 obstacles in this quotation are Bonosho, Gosho, and Hosho. Bonosho are the obstacles to one's practice, which arise from greed, anger, and stupidity or foolishness, and the like. Gosho are the obstacles posed by one's wife or children, and Hosho are the hindrances caused by one's sovereign or parents. Of the 4 devils, the functions of the devil of the 6th heaven are of this last kind. In Japan today, is there anyone who has actually encountered the 3 obstacles and 4 devils? Yet many people claim they have mastered the Makashikan. The statement, quote, "If you fall under their influence, you will be led into the paths of evil," unquote, does not indicate merely the 3 evil paths, but also tranquility and rapture. and in general, all of the 9 worlds. Therefore, all of the sutras except the Lotus Sutra, including those of Kegon, Egon, Ho-Do, and Hanya, as well as the Nirvana and Dainichi Sutras, will lead people toward paths of evil. Also, with the exception of the Tendai sect, the adherents of the 7 other major Buddhist sects are in reality agents of hell who drive others toward evil paths. Even in the Tendai sect, there are those who profess faith in the Lotus Sutra, yet actually lead others toward the pre-Lotus Sutra teachings. They too are agents of hell who cause people to fall into the evil paths. And the 7 other major sects refers to 3 Hinayana sects of Kushu, Jo, Jitsu, and Ritsu, and 4 Mahayana sects of Hoso, Sanran, Kegon, and Shingon. Now, you 2 brothers are like the hermit and his disciple. If either of you gives up halfway, you will both fail to attain Buddhahood. You are like the 2 wings of a bird or the 2 eyes of a man, and your wives are your support. Women support others and thereby cause others to support them. When a husband is happy, his wife will be fulfilled. If a husband is a thief, his wife will become one too. This is not a matter of this life alone. A man and wife are as close as a body and shadow, flowers and fruit, or roots and leaves in every existence of life. Insects eat the trees they live in, and fish drink the water in which they swim. If grass withers, orchids grieve. If pine trees flourish, oaks rejoice. Even trees and grass are so closely related. The hiyoko is a bird with 1 body and 2 heads. Both of its mouths nourish the same body. Hiboku are fish with only 1 eye each, so the male and female remain together for life. Husband and wife should be like them. You 2 wives should have no regrets, even if you are harmed by your husbands because of your faith in this teaching. If both of you unite encouraging their faith, you will follow the path of the Dragon King's daughter and become the model for women attaining enlightenment in the evil latter day of the law. Insofar as you can act this way, no matter what may happen, I, Nichiren, will tell the 2 saints, the 2 heavenly gods, doesn't matter, and the 10 goddesses, as well as Shakyamuni and Taho Buddha, to make you Buddhas in every future existence. The Roku Haramitsu Sutra states that one should become the master of his mind rather than let his mind master him. Whatever trouble may occur, consider it as transitory as a dream and think only of the Lotus Sutra. Nichiren's teaching was especially difficult to believe at first, but now that my prophecies have been fulfilled, those who slandered without reason have come to repent. Even if other men and women become my believers in the future, they will not replace you in my heart. Among those who believed at first, many later discarded their faith, fearing society's rejection. Among these are some who opposed me more furiously than those who slandered from the beginning. In Shakyamuni's lifetime, priest Sunakshatra at first believed the Buddha, then later not only backslid, but slandered so viciously that even the Buddha could not save him from falling into the hell of incessant suffering. This letter was especially written for Muninaga. It should also be read to his wife and Muninagas. Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. Nichiren, the 16th day of the 4th month in the 12th year of Bunei, 1275. Thank you for tuning in to Gosho Readings by Elisa. I hope you enjoyed and found useful this reading of Letter to the Brothers. If so, please give me a thumbs up. Consider subscribing so you can be notified of future readings of the Gosho, and feel free to explore them with anyone you know who is having vision issues or is blind or might like to just hear the readings read to them. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.